Hello, everyone. Today we are talking about a very important topic here, and this is going to be voted on November 3rd. And this is R90, Referendum 90. I have some special guests here today, Whitney.
Hello. Hi.
And Kim.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for being here. We're going to just dive right in because I think we need to get as much information out to the listening audience about R90. What is R90 for those that are just checking in for the first time and they're looking at their ballot and they're looking at their voter pamphlet and trying to go through this? What is this all about?
Well, Referendum 90 is our attempt to try and repeal ESSB 5395, which is the comprehensive sex ed mandate, which is coming out unfunded and will require a very specific method of teaching sex ed K through 12 in every public school in the state of Washington. And our organization has been looking at that approved curriculum and finding it is not what we want to have our children learn in school. So we got the signatures required to put this on the bill, to put it out, or to put it on the ballot in November, to put it out for a statewide vote.
So, listen to this, parents. Comprehensive sex education K through 12. I have grandchildren. I have children that are older. I would hate to see this get approved. So this conversation is to give you information about this particular referendum, about this bill that they passed in the legislation. Now it's brought back to we the people so we can vote on to ensure, I'm hoping, that we reject this. So as we continue on, Whitney, what is your take on this? And you know, how did you get started in this, where we are today and how we're going to move forward, you know, getting people involved? What's your kind of, you know, feel to this, and, you know, what's your stick in the mud?
My driving point is my two boys. I am a wife and a mother and the world's foremost expert on what is appropriate for my children. So I had a son who was entering school, and I heard that this bill was going to be going through the legislature, so I decided to look into it. And it sounds innocuous enough, I think, when you read the legislature, and it's almost deceptively simple. It's only 7 pages, and the words that they use are very non-offending, things that sound common sense that all parents want. But when we started diving into how these things are taught through the lens of the method of comprehensive sexuality education, we said, oh my gosh, we have a problem here. And so we just started diving into the curricula that OSPI has approved and putting it out on a Facebook page. And parents began seeing what these words mean in practice. And it just blew up like wildfire.
Total firestorm, yeah.
Let's talk about this curricula, because I think this is important, because like you said, Whitney, it's only a 7-page bill, and it's loaded with really colorful words, and everybody's kind of warming up to it. It's like, oh, this is not bad, etc. But obviously, with your research, digging a little deeper, you were able to unearth some things that frightened you both.
Yes.
So let's talk about this so we can make everyone aware of what that is.
Okay. I think one of the very first things that they always point out and say in the bill, and all of the people who are, you know, supporting this sex education method say, is that it's age appropriate. Who gets to decide that? That means different things to different people. And so, but according to this bill, OSPI ultimately gets to decide what is age appropriate. It's part of their standards. They review all the curriculum. This is the only subject in the schools of Washington that schools are required to submit their curriculum for approval to OSPI before they can actually teach it. They don't do it for any other subjects, just sex ed.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so you need to know what OSPI thinks is age appropriate. And the way you do that is you go and look at the curricula they have said meet their standards. And that's when we started finding huge problems with the things that they think are age appropriate. My favorite, and when I mean favorite, I mean the one that
got underneath you.
Rips me the most, is this lesson for 7th graders where they're listing different things that you can do that are STD free. for sex. And they're actually suggesting things to this class of 13-year-olds, and one of them is bathing together. And they actually mention that that's even important for building connections in your relationships. I don't understand where a school would think that it would be okay to actually suggest sex acts to other people's minor children and then give them the idea that hey, this is actually important if you want to show your, significant other that you love them. I don't know what teacher would be comfortable with teaching that. I don't know what parent would be okay with someone giving those ideas to their children. That's not a discussion for school.
I would have to agree with you there. And so this is a lot to unpack, folks.
Yes.
This is a lot to unpack, but I think it's critically important that we look at these from the right perspective, because at the end of the day, you want to be in control of what is being solicited. I'll put it in that word, or use that vernacular to your children and grandchildren. And what you're saying here, just use that example with the 7th grader, telling them to do this and to do that and bathe together and stuff like that. I don't know about you folks out there that are listening to us having this discussion today, but if you're not getting a little hot under the collar about what your children and grandchildren can be exposed to because someone thought that this was great to do, okay, anyway, I'll get off my soapbox and we're going to do some more unpacking here. When it talks about age appropriate, K through 12, is there any information in there talking about what can they teach to a 5 or 6-year-old?
Sure. So it's a little fuzzy the way they wrote it, because when you look at the language of the bill, it says K through 3 will learn social emotional learning. But if you delve deeper into the bill, there are several levels of the standards that come out of OSPI, and one of them is specific to like the sexual curriculum. And so it opens the door for some of the curriculum that we've read to be introduced as young as kindergarten. And to make it perfectly clear that was, I believe, the final intention, is we proposed an amendment that would not allow sex ed curricula to be taught K through 4, and that was rejected. So they have kept this door open, and if you go to the OSPI website, you can see that there is curriculum all the way down to kindergarten. I think my favorite example from that is telling in a co-ed class that girls have 3 holes between their legs and a sensitive spot called clitoris. And then if questions are asked, when you open the teacher's manual, there are full-on descriptions of the vagina expands to, fit the penis, and this is what a boner is. This is what is deemed appropriate for kindergarten according to OSPI.
I can't even articulate that. Teaching that type of comprehensive sexual education to a child that can barely read and write.
Yes.
5 and 6 years old. I think that's unconscionable. That someone would think that is good for a child, because what you plant in a child at an early age, you're setting that child up.
Yeah, exactly.
And then on top of that, I was reading through the bill, and it was saying something about giving parental, or the parent has the right to opt out, etc. I can only imagine this bill getting passed. This is all hypothetical because I'm hoping that we don't pass this, we reject this. And then the parent sends in their information saying, I object to my child receiving this education. And now that child is labeled, that family is labeled, and I can only imagine all of the red tape that parent is going to find themselves in to get their child to be opted out of that education.
Well, there's also other parts to the opt-out, because I think my favorite quote came from a teacher. She said, trying to opt out of sex ed is like trying to swim in the non-peeing side of the pool. Because, if your 5th grader is learning about anal sex, do you not think they're going to be talking about that at recess?
Yeah.
And then Comprehensive means integrated. That is part of the philosophy of this method, comprehensive sex ed, which is being mandated by this bill to the exclusion of all other ways of teaching sex ed. It's meant to be integrated. And the amendment we put forth to say, hey, you have to teach sex ed at a certain hour of the day. It can't be integrated into, say, your English class or your history class or your science class. That was also rejected. So they are purposely allowing it to go through other classes as we go forward.
Yeah.
Teachers were not allowed to opt out if a student was uncomfortable with what was being presented. You know, I think you have to picture a 12-year-old girl in a co-ed class with a male gym teacher learning about pleasure, saying, hey, I'd like not to hear this. And they rejected that opt-out for the student as well.
We had testimony from 2 young girls who actually lived through a CSE rollout at the school, and the bullying is exactly as you thought it would happen. That's exactly what they said did happen, is that kids were bullied for not taking the class, for opting out of the class. And they said it was impossible. They said that the locker room talk and the talk at the lunchrooms became much more lewd, that they would actually use examples from the lessons to kind of harass them and actually say, you know, hey, go look at page 46. And the girls would look and it was some lewd sex act. And they'd be like, are we discussing homework or are you harassing me here? Like, I don't understand what's happening. So they actually use the curriculum to harass other students with. And they were terrified with their testimony about.
So we're setting up an environment for this. I mean, you know, obviously people that look at this plan, and we'll talk about that in a moment, that are endorsing this plan or you know, siding with this comprehensive, you know, sex education. But we're creating an environment, in my opinion, that allows for this type of behavior in a peer setting, where you're putting one kid on the left, you're putting another kid on the right, and now they're at odds because one feels that, hey, look, you know, I'm not comfortable, and the other one is saying, well, why aren't you? Everybody's doing it, this, and that. We're setting up an environment for this, for kids to be bullied. And I mean, granted, I've heard this, oh my gosh, 3, 4, 5, 6 years over the last 5 to 6 years about bullying and the different tactics they use, and we should be safe, you know, or we should be putting our children in a safe environment where they don't feel that they're being bullied. But we're setting up the system because of this. Could potentially, or like you indicated, that example, we're setting up bullying. I mean, and I'm like, how in the world does our educational system go there and not think about these things?
We found it extra interesting that one of the amendments that they voted down was to allow kids to opt themselves out. In Washington State, I don't know if a lot of parents know this, but at 13 years old, your child is medically emancipated from you. So they can make decisions about their health and sexuality. They can get birth control, have abortions, get gender treatment, and all of these things without your knowledge or consent. They're mature enough to do that in Washington State, but they are not mature enough, according to our legislature, to decide they don't want to take a sex ed class.
Isn't that something? They're mature enough to go down there and say, I need all this, and I need to, you know, eradicate a kid and have an, you know, abort the child or whatever, but they're not smart enough. They're not bright enough. I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to take this. That's a double standard.
Exactly.
That's hypocrisy.
That's what this bill is. It is nothing but twisting of the truth to push an agenda, really.
There's so much of that. I was reading last year, Governor Inslee tried to ban vaping, right, and raise the vaping age. And he wrote this big proclamation talking about how companies use colors and flavors to target it to children, and he wanted all of that removed. And as I'm reading this proclamation from our governor, who's saying that, you know, children are easily swayed by colors and flavors, I'm looking at a curriculum or a lesson from the Flash curriculum that is telling kids that condoms come in many colors and flavors. Well, if flavors and colors are used to sell cigarettes and vape products, then what are you selling to our kids?
Exactly.
You're selling sex.
Yeah, you're selling sex. And God forbid this gets passed. Because I was reading it myself. They said that they were going to enact this if it got passed for K through 5 or 5th grade or 6th grade, 22, 23, and then the other age groups would come on board, 21 through 22 or something like that. Parents, if you're listening to us, please please read the bill. The bill's going to be nice and wordy and colorful, and it's going to be all, no, it is deeper. Whitney and Kim have done their homework. They have dove deep. They have gotten into the belly, if you will, of this bill, of this referendum, and they pulled out all of the gunk that's in this thing, and they are getting ready to just cram it down our children's throats and
take away your rights as a parent.
Exactly. What are you going to do about that? It's on the ballot. We need to vote this down.
Yes, and let's be clear. We are not against sex ed.
Of course
we are
not
for abstinence only. And the other side is constantly trying to pin that on us. They don't want sex ed at all, or they're abstinence only, and sexual risk avoidance is abstinence. And no, we want common sense sex ed. It is this method that we are against. All of these things are common sense, but when you teach them through the CSE method is when they become inappropriate and dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're really saying here, if I can add my color to this, what you're saying here is that sex education is good and appropriate when appropriately applied at the right time and with the right ages. To make everything kind of carte blanche where everybody's getting it, regardless whether you want it or not, that's, in my opinion, where you've crossed the line. And we, as people of Washington State that have children and grandchildren, if you got any kind of wits about you, you would be saying, no. I am not going to give up my rights because it sounds good on paper, but when you get into the guts of this thing, it's not really good for our children.
We actually had detectives in sex trafficking divisions read the curriculum and say, this is a grooming manual for kids. It desenses kids. We know kids get uncomfortable talking about this stuff. And so CSE doesn't respect that. What they do is they push past that and say they literally have to desensitize children to become comfortable with having these explicitly sexual conversations with other adults, and that is a huge safety issue, particularly in the sex trafficking divisions. And
right. I mean, step one is to become a trusted, parent, and so by pushing this so early on children, they get accustomed to adults talking about this, right? Mm-hmm. Then there is repeated examples of introducing the idea of the trusted adult, which is not the parent. So they're cutting the parents out of this conversation and introducing teachers and, Planned Parenthood clinics and places where kids can go without their parents knowing what's happening. And those are literally steps in the grooming cycle that predators use to attack their victims.
So let me ask you this, Kim. What would you say to a parent out there that's listening to us today and they're kind of on the other side of the fence because mm-hmm. we're vehemently opposed to, passing this referendum and rejecting this all the way down. But what would you say to somebody that is looking at this from a different lens, maybe, and they're trying to kind of come to grips of what we're talking about and having the discussion on this level? What would you tell that parent?
I would say, one, read the bill. But then go ahead. We proposed over 200 amendments. 29 of them were heard. Every one of them was rejected. So if you look at those amendments, they were reasonable, and not one of them was passed. And then when you do that, I'd ask you to come to our page, either our Facebook page or our informedparentsofwashington.com. We have posted just example after example of what they consider age appropriate, what they consider medically accurate. And I think you'll be shocked by what you see there. And there is common ground. And this bill is not it.
Yeah, it sounds like, and just reading this earlier, it sounds like this is just really swayed or slanted to, just cram it down our throats. And I don't see commonality. I don't see okay, well, look, we will compromise. We'll say, let's wait to 8th grade, or we'll say, wait till this grade. it's like, no, it's all or nothing.
Yes.
And that's what I read here. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't sound right. This can't be an all or nothing situation here. But it is.
No,
It
it
is.
clearly, OSPI even put out a survey to parents asking whether or not they wanted comprehensive sexuality education taught to their children. And the majority of parents responded to OSPI's own survey that they did not want this to be the method in their schools, but OSPI pushed it anyways. The legislature ignored tens of thousands of emails. They ignored thousands of parents who showed up at early morning sessions to talk against this bill. We had 750 people total show up for one of these committee hearings, and 634 of them were against this bill. 21,688 phone calls were made to legislators about this bill, and they ignored every single one of them to push this agenda. We even tried to go down and have a lobby day where we brought examples of the curricula to legislators. Not one of them would look at it because they didn't want to be morally responsible for knowing what they were actually passing.
No, that's sad, Whitney. Gosh, how can I articulate this? This got me to a place where normally I'm not at a loss for words, but because this hits home because this is going to affect my children's children if we don't do something about this. But when you say all of these things, the phone calls, the 700 some people showing up and the 630 some people that said no, all of these things that are happening, to me, what that tells me is that our leadership in Washington State has an agenda that they're going to ramrod through, regardless if the people voted up or down. Mm-hmm. It's kind of going back to the Tim Eyman when he was trying to get the $30 car tabs. Yep. And then they were like, okay, we'll put it on the ballot. Well, the people said $30. And then they went to court. Now we're back in this back and forth thing. It seems as though that our legislators have an agenda and it doesn't matter. And if they can figure out a way to ramrod us and get it to where they want it, then, hey, they've done their job.
A couple of years ago in 2018, the legislature passed Aaron's Law, which is a sexual abuse prevention law. And it received bipartisan support. Not a single member voted against it because it was common sense. It does what people want it to do, which is what they say this bill is going to do, and it doesn't. Aaron's Law would have taught common sense sexual abuse to children. And again, bipartisan report. 2 years later, you have this split down the middle where it's completely down party lines for ESSB 5395. And if you can watch, and I would encourage people to go and watch the testimony and the floor debates that they had, there were legislators out there who listened to their constituents. They saw that parents were concerned. They saw that parents were alarmed. They saw that the people that they are there to represent had problems and needed to work through this more, and that this was being ramrodded through, and they really tried to stop this. But you're right, there was a complete agenda to just push this through absolutely no matter what.
To add on to that, this bill first started in 2019, and there was huge parental opposition. So at the very last day of the 2019 session, they freed up $100,000 for an OSPI work group. And it was a bunch of group thinkers who got together and said, yeah, this is perfect. And so that was their justification. Those are the people that sent out the survey that, more parents said we don't want this than, the majority. So you can see they've just been, we're going to get this through no matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah.
So let's say, hypothetically, God forbid, those of you that are watching out there today, and you're jumping on our side of the fence and you're saying, yes, I'm going to vote this thing down. I'm going to reject this thing. But let's say for whatever reason, we just don't meet that burden and we don't get it rejected down. What do we do then? I mean, granted, and I have to applaud both of you, Whitney and Kim, I have to applaud both of you for creating the Facebook and having, parents go on there to look at things, to have this coalition going so we can fight, shoulder to shoulder. But let's say hypothetically this thing gets voted in, God forbid. What do we do at that point? Are there any other type? Do we have recourse other than trying to opt our child in and out and go through all of this red tape? What are there other recourse out there, or is there any?
Theoretically, you're supposed to be able to go to your school board and battle it out there. But
I've seen school boards.
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So the first battle would be start really annoying your school board. The second thing is Maya Espinoza is running for the superintendent, the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. She is very much against this curriculum. So I think by having a new person in charge, that would definitely, we could start walking back some of these standards that parents find so reprehensible, and at least, start making the change. And I would say one thing I learned with this whole COVID thing is that you can homeschool.
Yes, you can.
Yes,
You can send a message when kids
Yes.
start getting pulled out of public school that we don't want this and they stop getting paid. That will make a difference.
Yeah, that will make a difference because, obviously the feds gives us, funding for our schools. And if we start saying, hey, no, this is not going to work for us, we're just going to keep our kids right here and do it homeschool, I think they'll start to get the message that we, the people, are saying something about bills and laws that you want to pass and you want us to just succumb to them. No. We're going to do something differently. So at least we know that, God forbid, if it does get approved, we do have some recourse and we can do things differently. So, I'm hoping that that is not the case, that we reject this all the way down. And so we're going to do our job and letting people know through this podcast, through Facebook, through the website, through our personal contacts, etc. Get the word out. Let people know that just because you see something on paper and it looks pretty and it sounds good, isn't always good until you get into the belly, till you get into the guts of what a bill is.
Yes,
and I really appreciate you ladies coming on today. So as we wrap up here today, I just want to hear from both of you. If you're talking to that person that's on the fence or they're just uncertain about which way they're going to vote, what would you tell them? Whitney?
I would say that you really need to do the homework and look at the curriculum, look at what they consider to be comprehensive, look at all the things, ask yourself what you would want your kid to know about sex and a sex ed education. Would you want them to know birth failure rates, birth control failure rates? Because CSE doesn't teach that in a lot of their curriculums because that's considered a non-positive thing and shaming kids, so they don't mention that. Would you want kids to know that there was a study that in 2015, the CDC found that kids who are sexually active actually have poorer outcomes than kids who abstain and wait a little bit longer. And early sexualization can actually bring to internalization, withdrawal, depression, these things that actually have an emotional effect on our children. These are all things I think we would want our kids to know in sex ed in addition to how to stay safe. And the comprehensive sexuality method does not teach those things. It's not actually a comprehensive method at all, I think, if you think of it. And then look at the people who voted for this. Look at who listened to the constituents and who didn't, and then go check out our voter scorecard because we have assembled a list for people to go and look at all the candidates and see where they stand on this particular issue, and then they can affect some real lasting change that way.
Well put. Kim?
I'm not sure I can top that other than I would say come and look at the curriculum and see for yourself exactly what they think is appropriate for your children. And I think you're going to be shocked by what you find.
Wow. If this is not an important topic to you, I don't know what is. Because our children are what? Not only are they are here today, but they're our future. And we want to make sure that we're insulating our children. And we want to make sure that we put our children in the best possible environment. And sometimes having this type of education at a very, very young age where they're still innocent and they're still learning about, colors and the alphabet and trying to count and, trying to tie their shoes and all of these different things. And we're trying to force feed these children and really force feed the parents and put this kind of like on a bow on it, if you will, and make it all nice and pretty. But like I said, when you get into the meat and potatoes of this bill, it is something to be seen and it's something to reckon with. And we as parents and grandparents, or those of you that just care about children as a whole, and you're at the age where you can vote, please vote this thing down. Reject this bill all the way to Olympia. And like I said, God forbid if it passes, we do have some recourse. But you know what? Let's do our job on the front end where we don't have to get to the recourse. Let's sound the horn. Let's make sure our voices are heard going into November 3rd. And let's do our due diligence. Like you ladies said, read the curriculum. Go in there, read the bill. Get in on Facebook. Check them out. If you have any questions, by all means, reach out to these ladies. They know what they're talking about. They've done the homework. They've done the research. And you know what? At the end of the day, I believe we're all going to be better for it because we're protecting our children, which are our future. Thank you for tuning in today. There are going to be other topics coming down the pike, but get out there and vote. Let your voice be heard. This is an important topic. Vote down R90. Take care.
Thank you for having
so
us.
much for having us.
You bet.